Blessings in Jesus, dear friends. My name is James Jacob Prash. I'm in New York at the moment, very jet lagged, but I'm going to do a hot take with the approval of my colleagues. Let's begin. There are a number of issues happening, of course, in this week's news agenda, as in every week, but things are intensifying. I think the perspective I would like to look at these primary events is disinformation and misinformation and general misrepresentation, certainly by the mainstream media and also by the liberal political establishment in the United States and by obviously a variety of foreign leaders, particularly China. It is interesting to note that the tariffs are being called tariffs, but what's not being told is these are reciprocal tariffs. These are reciprocal tariffs. Up to 4 times the tariff rate is charged the United States for our exports as they charge for imports. In other words, we up to 4 times as much to export something to some of these countries as it costs us to import it. They can dump it here at a low tariff rate, but if we try to market our merchandise, even the same merchandise to them, it's at a higher rate. And it's being called tariffs. In fact, what it should be called is reciprocal tariffs or reciprocity. Those countries who are complaining about the tariff rates have 2 options. One, they can either lower the tariffs or remove them and have absolute fair trade with zero tariff, or they can build in the United States. But you cannot be taxing American imports 4 times higher than America charges you for your imports and then complain about it when America raises its tariffs and begin talking about retaliation. Now, the European Union, despite the rhetoric that they're putting out in the public, have acquiesced. They are wanting to negotiate with this, and over 30 countries, over 30, have already approached the Trump administration wanting to negotiate this inequality. Therefore, the Trump administration has delayed the tariffs on every nation except for China, which is the next problem. But the way we are being told that it's tariffs, it's American tariffs, it is simply reciprocity. It is simply making the tariffs equitable and reciprocal. If you don't want to pay the tariffs on American imports into your country, then lower your own, or else build your factory in Illinois or Pennsylvania or somewhere. You don't have to have this problem, but it's a problem of their making. It's not a problem of our making. Mr. Trump is responding to it. This shows us that the issue is not really primarily economic, it's political. It is the anti-Trump establishment simply misrepresenting the factual realities for political reasons and grasping at straws in order to do so. Will it send some prices higher? Yes, but it will send some prices lower. And it will additionally cause more goods and produce to come from the United States. Some of this will be done robotically and with the assistance of AI now, obviously, in production systems, but it will also create a lot of blue-collar jobs in the swing states, in the Rust Belt states, particularly around the Great Lakes and in the upper Midwest. They're not telling the whole story. They're only looking at the downside, short-term to medium, not to the medium long-term advantages. They're pointing out its impact on the dollar and its impact on bond yields. That is true, but China has been systematically undermining or undervaluing its own currency in order to undermine our economic prowess. When you weaken the dollar, you make American exports cheaper and you make imports more expensive. America is simply responding by doing what China did. Now, this does bring pressures on the dollar that we don't want to see the dollar threatened as the world currency reserve. That is absolute reality that must be taken into account. But the media is not telling the entire story. Additionally, bond yields have gone higher because treasury bills become a more risky investment. But who are the major holders of these treasury bills? Japan, but China. China. It is devaluing China's investment. It is the Trump administration responding to China. What China has been doing, using cheap labor, using industrial espionage, using its own tariff system to create artificial advantages for itself that it has been doing ever since 2001, when the Bush administration allowed China to join the World Trade Organization, which replaced the old GATT, the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, and they had the World Trade Organization, the WTO, and Bush being what he did, same as he gave the Saudi Arabians the green light to shaft America, Bush gave China the green light to shaft America. Of course, he could say he didn't know it at the time, but there were already indications what China's game was. They used us to finance their arms buildup. They used us to finance their arms buildup. Not only that, they're sending students for postgraduate educations who are here to engage in industrial espionage and the theft of technology and research and development. The Chinese government is in bed with almost every industry in China. So they will underprice us in terms of manufacturing costs, sell things invented in America or other countries back to us at a lower price, which they can do not simply because of cheaper labor, but because they don't have to recover the research and development costs. They're just using us to do the research and development, stealing the technology, selling it back to us, and using the profits to build a war machine. This is what the Democratic Party wants to allow to continue. It is almost unthinkable to draw any other conclusion that Hunter Biden was paid by China. We know he was paid by China, but was he being paid to gain access to his father? Something his father denied and lied about, but it's something his father actually did. Everything from the reconnaissance balloons to being insulted in trade talks in Alaska by China. This is what the Biden administration was and did, and this is what the Democratic Party, taken over by the liberal establishment, has done. And again, there's the element of the globalism. It is not tariffs. It is simply reciprocity. We are not putting in tariffs or raising tariffs beyond what we are being charged ourselves. The truth's just not being told. Secondly, the issue goes beyond this. There needs to be a ban on Chinese postgraduate students coming to the United States. But something else needs to happen. Two other things the Trump administration should ideally do. One is to take the sovereign bonds that go back before Mao, $3 trillion held in the United States, and use those to pay back the treasury bills. Use those to pay back the treasury bills, wiping $3 trillion off the American deficit, money that China legitimately and legally owes us. Second thing, in addition to that, and the student visa would be the third thing, is what they need to do is delist Chinese industries, all of which are controlled by the Chinese Communist Party, delist them from the New York Stock Exchange. Just delist them. We're talking somewhere between $500 billion to $750 billion. Delist them. They're ripping us off to build their war machine with the blessings of the mainstream media, with the blessings of the liberal Democratic Party. But that's what they're doing. These things are outrageous. Countries and companies have a choice. One, the companies can build here. And two, the countries can lower their own tariff rates. They're blaming us for responding to something they have done. This is not something America initiated. It's just that we have not had administrations that have acted on behalf of the country. We've been being sold down the river, certainly by Bush, certainly by Clinton, certainly by Obama. One after another have sold us down the river to these foreign interests, hurting American jobs, hurting American deficit, driving up the deficit incredibly. Another case is Mexico. When you've got these illegal aliens coming into the United States in droves and droves, accessing public benefit, and then sending some of that benefit back to Mexico. They are simply using us to pay for welfare in Mexico. That's what they're doing. They're coming here, taking advantage of our system of public assistance to the poor, the disadvantaged, to which an illegal immigrant is not entitled, and sending money back to where they came from. This is just an absolute legalized pickpocketing of American workers and American taxpayers. Yet when you respond to it, they scream, you're picking on immigrants. No, illegal immigrants are not immigrants. They are criminals. This goes on and on. Not least of all, we have the situation with Canada, whose elections are coming up on the 28th. Trudeau is gone, thankfully, but Carney is no better, and in some ways, quite conceivably worse. I know the havoc he wreaked when he was in England with the Bank of England. He's a Canadian-British dual national. Most of the projections from the polls think he's going to win. The idea of Canada being a 51st state is not plausible. However, if he does win, it is going to drive up secessionism, secessionist sentiments in Manitoba, in Saskatchewan, and in Alberta. The people in those Western provinces are getting fed up with Ottawa. They're getting fed up pandering to the Quebec French. Canada has an equalizer law. That's what they call it, where people in these Western provinces where there's mineral wealth are forced to subsidize the policies of the Liberal government and basically bribe Quebec to stay in Canada. Problematically, apart from those three main Western provinces, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Alberta, most of Canada, not all of it, but most of Canada is politically liberal. This is true of the maritime provinces, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and it is true of British Columbia and certainly of most of Ontario. The people in the middle of the country are tired of being ripped off. This will push secessionist sentiments in the middle of the country. So you've got the Quebec French, who since the 1970s have been engaging in political blackmail to remain in Canada, that have a secessionist movement, Québécois National, and then you have now people in the West tired of being exploited and ripped off and being handed the bill. Something in Canada has got to break sooner or later, and probably sooner than later. The outcome of these elections is going to be a determining factor. But at present, taken on a national level, it looks like the Liberal Party, despite the havoc they've wreaked again, and despite the havoc wreaked in England by Carney, are going to win the election. This will have tremendous ramifications, not only for Canada, but for Canada's future relations with the United States. Finally, there's much talk about the book, The Fight. Under the Biden administration, there was no administration. There was a cabal of people that many people didn't even know of. This woman, Amy Dunn, and Steve Poschetti, and of course, Jake Sullivan and Crane. They were a committee almost, a cabal, who were running the administration, knowing that Biden was in cognitive decline, which obviously Harris also knew. And now she's trying to revive her political career, postulating the possibilities of either a return to federal election, the federal office, or the governorship of California. This book is something. It shows how we were lied to by the media, by the Democrat Party establishment, and it shows that people like Clinton's uh, did not want Harris, that Barack Obama did not think she could win. It was the Congressional Black Caucus, led by Clyburn, who pushed in Harris and pushed in Ketanji Brown into the Supreme Court. They didn't really want her, but it was a political arm twisting. That's what happened. And it didn't even work because 24 to 26% of Black American men voted for Trump. Nonetheless, that is what happened. We were just lied to and lied to and lied to in the closing years of the Biden administration, and they are still lying. They don't even have a leader. This is the reality. That is the take.